Welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Lauren Lane. For 50 years now, the LSI team has dedicated themselves to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. This week, Sean and I are going to talk about the importance of lifelong learning and why humility is such an important part of the learning process. He's also going to tell me the story of how he learned a new instrument during the pandemic and the struggles, challenges, and wins he's faced during his learning process. So let's just jump right on in. Hi, Sean. How are you doing today?
Hey, Lauren. Welcome to this second episode of 4 series that we decided to record together. And I loved this conversation that we had in this last episode. One of the things I've been thinking about, and maybe some of that coming out of this discussion that we had on attitude, is being humble enough to learn something new. And I've thought a lot about that, and I've known a lot of people in our company, a lot of our clients. I mean, I've seen this so many times throughout my life, is that people, especially if you get an advanced degree, sometimes people get impressed with their education and they stop learning. And to be humble enough to learn something new and continue to learn new things, I think is so important and a critical part of success, especially in our business.
I would agree. And hi, it's also good to be here. I agree. I think that sometimes we reach points in our lives where we say, oh, we've learned it all, or, oh, I've done it all. I don't need to experience anymore. I don't need to learn anymore. I know what is good for me. I know what's right. And people just move on thinking that this is the end and you're not going to progress any further, when that's not the truth at all. I mean, you're continually progressing, evolving, and learning. So I think this is a fascinating topic, and I'm really excited to dive in with you.
I have seen even members of our team that have these incredible degrees from marquee schools. I've had people that have worked for us over the years that have had Harvard MBAs, or Harvard, have had gone to Harvard Law School, or these impressive degrees from marquee schools. And yet what I find often happens is members of our team that may not have had that kind of education, or what I think America has decided, that quality of education, which I don't agree with. Oftentimes they are better learners, more humble and eager to learn than members of the team that have become impressed with, oh my goodness, I've got a PhD in whatever from Harvard, or I have a master's in business from Harvard, and they get impressed with that education and then stop learning. And many times it really is these individuals that may have had just standard state education or didn't graduate, and yet are these voracious readers and are continuously learning.
I would agree. I think it all comes back to your mindset behind degrees in education. If your purpose for getting a degree is to learn and to continue to grow, versus just going to get the piece of paper that says Harvard or whatever school on it, I think that makes all the difference. I have seen that in my personal life with friends and colleagues here in DC, where they say, oh, well, I'm going to Johns Hopkins, or I'm going to Yale or Brown or Princeton or whatever. And they are simply doing it because they just want the degree that says I went to X school. They're not doing it because they're necessarily invested in whatever they're learning. Versus the people who are saying, yeah, I'm going to this tiny little school, but I love what I'm learning and I'm learning every day. So
I think it's a fascinating cultural, this phenomenon that does not, for the most part, does not happen out west. There is almost this anxiety that I feel in the East having spent so much time in the East over the last 30 years, I've seen it where families and individuals believe that if you do not have a degree from a marquee school, it's not just the degree. You need, as you said, a degree from Princeton or Yale or Harvard or one of the UVA, one of these marquee schools. And if you don't have that, then you're at a disadvantage from everyone else. And I think this phenomenon in the West, which is what I see is it doesn't matter if you get a degree from a state school that accepts everyone, what you do with it, a lot of it is your ambition, drive, the hard work that goes behind it, your attitude. So it is this interesting phenomenon that has happened culturally in America that is you plan from the time you're in preschool until you graduate, you've got to get into a marquee school and get multiple degrees from these schools. Otherwise, you're at a disadvantage. And that cultural phenomenon does not exist for the most part out West.
I agree. It's definitely been, as someone who's moved from Utah to the East and is in this, I think, especially the prime time of life for people to be getting these degrees, it definitely has been something very interesting to see what people think, especially from people who are natives versus outsiders from the DC area. And I don't know, it's just, I feel I only have my bachelor's degree. Well, not only.
Oh my goodness.
And yet everyone I talk to, it feels like, oh yeah, I have my master's in this, or I'm getting my PhD in this, or I'm going back to get my third degree in, XYZ. And it's great because I love to be around people who uplift me and challenge me and want me to be better. So it's just an interesting dynamic. I feel like I'm constantly battling.
And I often find that there's so much money, so much time invested in these degrees, especially from marquee schools, that once it ends, it very often kills the desire for just pure learning from these individuals. I have seen so many people that I'm done with school, I got my degrees, and I'm done learning. And they are become impressed with their degrees. Yet oftentimes, and especially with these kids in the West, they don't feel that way. It is, I want to continually learn. It is about continuous learning and being humble enough that I don't have a degree from Harvard or Yale or Princeton, and I'm going to continue a path of lifelong learning.
I
And
would agree.
I think that one of the traits that has been evident in our business and in our industry is the ability to be humble enough to learn new things. Our industry changes daily, and to be effective in managing multiple projects from the very technical to sometimes we're working on these space guidance programs, and we're also working projects around aircraft maintenance. So, I mean, a very vast high-end technology to blue-collar maintenance and sustainment, right? So having the ability to learn no matter where you're at and being humble enough to learn something new, I think has set a lot of people up for success or failure in our industry.
I agree. And I'm a huge proponent of education. I'm a big believer in
I am
education
too.
in whatever form that is. I don't know if that necessarily means you have to go get a PhD for every subject you're interested in, but I just think that means continual research and understanding and learning in whatever capacity that might be, not necessarily in a classroom setting.
I also have seen, and I'll put this out as well, that I've seen people that have been held back in their career, in their life, because they felt like, oh my goodness, I've got a degree from a state school, I've only got a bachelor's degree, or I didn't get a degree, and that thinking holds them back. And it could not be further from the truth. It's at this time in history, it does not matter what degree you have or you don't have. It is your ability to be self-motivated to continually learn new things. And it's out there, whatever it is, whatever subject it is, you can find a way to learn these topics through YouTube. I make fun of my kids that, like, I say to them, where'd you learn that? They're like, I learned it from YouTube. There is no excuse for anyone in America not to have the skill set, the training, the learning, the background, the foundation on any subject.
Yeah, I mean, I am constantly talking to my brothers about this. They're like, Lauren, did you know you could do this with this type of sheet metal? And I'm like, no, how do you do that? And they said, well, I watched a random YouTube video. And I say, okay, that's great. Can you send me the link? Like,
I want to preface this by saying, not only have I seen individuals in our business, in our industry, that have gotten amazing, impressive, marquee degrees from marquee schools and then stop learning, and that has absolutely crippled their potential. I've seen that. I've also seen individuals that have this mindset, I've got a bachelor's degree or I've got an associate degree and I don't have the training or skills necessary to progress in my career. I think they're both tragic, that based on your attitude and your mindset of, I've got my degree, I'm going to stop learning, or I don't have a degree, and that will also cripple your career as well. I think both states are equally a challenge.
I agree. I think there's only a handful of professions that truly require secondary and multiple degrees. And if you're a doctor, I want you to have every degree in the book. If you're a dentist, I would like you to go to a lot of school. If you're a lawyer, I'd like you to know what you're talking about.
I think so much of that, though, is your mindset growing up in the West, that it is very entrepreneurial. It's about hard work. It's about ambition and drive and figuring shit out. Right?
That's really always what it comes back to is, are you determined enough to figure out how to get through corporate America? Are you brave enough to weather whatever storm is coming towards you with what you're personally equipped with? If you can't figure out the corporate America shitstorm, then that's like something that you have failed to do. That's completely on you. That's not on anyone else.
Agreed. So I promised you that I would get personal on a journey that I've been on and how much I have learned about being humble, especially when learning new things. And I think it's an interesting story that maybe outside of our industry, but I think there's a lot of relevance, and it has taught me a lot about my work and business and discipline in general. 30 years ago, I had this opportunity to go to Switzerland on a business trip. I was working with a large client of ours, and we had just won a huge contract. And at the end of this week, we had this long week and a lot of strategy meetings and long nights, and this group said, we want to take you into the mountains. They knew that I loved the mountains and had loved being in the mountains and loved the Alps. I had this opportunity at such a young age to go to the Alps, and I had fallen in love with the French and Swiss Alps, and I've got this amazing connection to the Alps today. And we went up into the mountains in this part of Switzerland called Interlaken. And we're sitting there having this amazing dinner and cheese and meat and all of this incredible Swiss food, which I love.
Sounds terrible.
It was awesome. I mean, I can still remember it to this day. It was 30 years ago, and to this day, I can still remember it. And we're sitting there, and this client of mine who he had sort of thought he was my mentor. He knew he was this old, grizzled business development, Swiss, German, rough, strong guy, and here I am, this young. That I think initially, when I was put on his engagement, he was not happy because he was thinking, "Oh my goodness, what is this young 20-something going to contribute?" And then we won this huge contract, huge. It was huge, and I had worked the strategy and the proposal, and he sort of had this connection to me, but still saw me as, his protege. I think he was my client, but if that makes sense, he thought he was going to mentor me through a lot of this, and he did. He taught me a lot, but we're sitting up there, and he's pretty drunk and really celebrating. We're with the group, with the client, celebrating this win. And it was a big win for me early in my career, and just it was a exciting time. And he's telling me this story of how he grew up in Switzerland, how the mountains were so important to him and his family and the culture. And he told me this story of how it doesn't matter if you're young or old, you have this alpine culture, and it's part of the fabric of Switzerland. And I said to him, growing up in the Wasatch, that's how we are. And he talked about how he was skiing at a young age. I said, I was skiing at a young age. I was telling him, I lived in the mountains, and I had this young baby, and how I could not wait to have my baby, and now she's 30 years old, over 30, get on skis, and that I feel that same kind of connection to the mountains. And right on cue, as he's telling me this amazing story, and how he's given me this history of Switzerland and the Swiss culture in the mountains, and he tells me this story of how the Swiss have translated the love of mountains through this instrument, the alphorn. And this old Swiss shepherd, I don't know, like in full Swiss dress, walks out with this 13-foot long wooden instrument and starts playing the most amazing music. And to this day, I had never heard it before. I'd never heard this music played before, this instrument played before, never heard of it, never knew anything about it. And he plays this song, and this guy is telling me, oh, this is a traditional Swiss song. That it's about the mountains and about the beauty of the mountains. And this old, like I said, old shepherd dressed in the full costume continues to play for, I don't know, probably an hour. And they're telling me these stories of how long ago Switzerland was a very poor country because it was so mountainous. And we think of Switzerland today as being this rich country and the center of commerce in Europe, but that wasn't how it was. Even 200 years ago, it was a poor country, and most of what is now Switzerland was these little communities in the mountains, so poor, and they were mostly shepherds. And we think of the other thing, when we think of Switzerland, or at least I do today, I think of cheese and chocolate and dairy, right? Because of the dairy of Switzerland. That's recent. I mean, just in the last 150 years or even less, the turn of the 20th century, did Switzerland become known for dairy products. Before that, the shepherds had goats and sheep, and they were in the mountains. And to pass the time, they would build these horns, these alphorns. And so the story is that 2,000 years ago, what's now Switzerland, the Swiss shepherds would look for a tree growing out of the side of the mountain that had a curve in it. And so if you've been in the mountains and you've seen these trees that are maybe on a riverbank or a steep side of a hill, the tree will have a natural bend in it as it tries to find sunlight. And so these shepherds would look for a tree that had the natural bend in it. They would look for a tree that was the length of 2 men. And so that was about 13 feet. These guys were tall.
I was going to ask, is every man in Switzerland
I
like
know.
five?
No, I mean, that's a good point too. So the other thing that I think is so fun about this story is we think about the precise and the discipline of Swiss culture, and that's not, I mean, these instruments were pretty rough and different lengths, and not, they were for the shepherd. It really was not, they weren't made to play in an orchestra or whatnot. So they would look for these trees that was the length of 2 men, about 12 to 13 feet in length. And they would cut the tree down, hollow it out, and create these horns. And a lot of it, you can imagine these shepherds 2,000 years ago in the mountains, bored, and they invented this music. So hearing this music, and I'll talk some more about the history of this, which I think is really interesting. And I've not only have I gone down this path of learning this crazy instrument and music, but I've learned so much about the history of this instrument as well, and I've really fallen in love with it. And it came from that night, being in Interlaken in the mountains on this cold evening, sitting outside, listening to this incredible music, and I was in love with it. I mean, it was almost. I know this sounds crazy. It was a spiritual experience for me, where that music and the story and just being in the mountains touched me so deeply that to this day I can remember the emotion and how it touched me so deeply. Interestingly, following that engagement, I got put on another engagement in Munich and ended up going to Munich almost every month for 2 years, which was also an incredible experience. I'd had this exposure to the Swiss Alps. Now I'm in the German Alps, in Bavaria. Very different, very, equally rich in history. Bavaria versus the Swiss culture is so different, and sort of got the same indoctrination with my clients in Munich over this 2-year period of time, where I spent so much time in Munich working this big project. And while I was there, they love to party. The Bavarian culture at their heart, at their core is, we think of Oktoberfest. It's Oktoberfest there every day in Bavaria, in Munich, and so much of my time in Munich and in the Bavarian, the same kind of thing. They were excited to show me the mountains. They knew I had a love for skiing and the mountains, and so they would take me into all of these mountains of Bavaria. But a big part of that was the going to Oktoberfest and the big Oktoberfest, the Munich Oktoberfest, which was, thousands of people. It's the identity. It is the event of that region that really identifies Bavaria, I think. And so I don't know. What are your when I say tell me what you think of when you think of Oktoberfest? What do you think of?
I mean, honestly, my experience with Oktoberfest is almost strictly limited to the Snowbird Oktoberfest held in Utah every
It's just
year.
pretty good.
Pretty
It's not
good.
bad. It's
But I think my first thoughts are like pretzels and
yes.
having a really good time and just like dancing and just boisterous laughter. And it sounds like a great time. It's on my bucket list to go. So every
Okay,
time you say, I'm
so
like, I need to go and experience this firsthand.
Bavaria is Oktoberfest every day, and it all starts with beer, drinking beer, and being in the beer garden and the music. And so you said your thoughts are and vision of Oktoberfest is dancing and music and partying. That's every day in Munich.
It sounds like a great time.
So while I was there, again, I was exposed to the alphorn. And so sometime, we think in around 1500 or maybe a little earlier, that this tradition of the alphorn emanated from Interlaken in Switzerland into some of these other mountain areas. And it got picked up in Munich, I think, because of the polka music, and it was sort of a novelty. And so all of these bands had alphorns in them. And I was just still enamored with these alphorns. And so that was sort of the foundation, but never, I mean, it never went anywhere. I had no music background or foundation at all. And several years ago, and Catherine knew that. Catherine, you talked about the Oktoberfest at Snowbird, which is pretty good. And every year there's thousands of people that go to the Snowbird Oktoberfest. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's Snowbird's a ski community in Little Cottonwood Canyon, which is a famous ski area along the Wasatch. At the top of the mountain of Snowbird, it's about 10,000 feet, vertical feet, with a big iconic tram that'll take you up there. And there has been a lot of German and Swiss immigrants that have come to Utah over the last 150 years. And they've brought the Swiss and German traditions with them, the music and food and whatnot. And so it's pretty good. I mean, I've been to a lot of Oktoberfests around the world. That Oktoberfest is pretty good. And typically there would be alphorns that would play. And I remember going back to that day in Interlaken, hearing the alphorns play, and just had always just touched something in my soul. And so several years ago, Catherine decides she's going to give me an alphorn. I think initially she had this idea she was going to give me an alphorn for Christmas. And I mean, it turned into this long event. I mean, I'll quickly tell you, because the story in itself is incredible. She had found an old Swiss alphorn maker, which was a real, and to this day, it is to my Swiss and German alphorn makers, and one of my heroes, Bill Hobson, who I have one of his horns. this is such an art. I mean, until recently, all of these horns were handmade, and they would take years to build. So Catherine found a maker in Switzerland, barely spoke English. She gets him on the phone and tells him, I want to have you make an alphorn. So he says to her, "Oh, I mean, wire me $3,000 and I'll start." So she doesn't know this guy, sends him a wire. The guy can barely speak English.
If that's not a sketchy start to a story, I don't know what is.
Okay, I'll build you this instrument. Wire me $3,000. So that this goes on, and then I guess she kind of forgot about it. So it's like 2 years passed. The guy calls her back and says, "Okay, I've got your alphorn completed. Wire me another $2,000 and I'll ship it to you." And she does.
Catherine.
So she wires him another $2,000. Still months pass. She doesn't get it. She finds that it's stuck in customs. It had been stuck in customs for months, and they had and in fact, one of my friends just had this happen just last month, and I was telling him this story, and I said, "Here's what you need to do. You need to call the customs agent, tell him to open it up, take the instrument out." I mean, I was telling him this story. So she finally finds it. It had been stuck in customs. There had been a problem. She gets it through customs, finally gets here in December of 2018. And so she gives it to me for my birthday. And it's like the leg lamp from Christmas Story, So it's this huge box full of like packing, and I open it up, and when the dad's taking the leg lamp out of the box, right? That's what it was like, and I'm like, "What is that? Oh my goodness, I can't believe this!" And so I'm like, "This is incredible! This handmade, most beautiful instrument." And I had no idea about the story or how difficult it was to get it. And this maker sadly has since passed away. And we think that this is one of the last alphorns that he had made. So I've got this beautiful wooden 13-foot long instrument in my office, at my house, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this? What in the world am I going to do with this instrument? I mean, it's just this gorgeous piece of art. I can't play. I can't even make a note. Nothing. So for several months, it just sits in my office. I try to play it. I try to look things up on the internet. There's nothing out there. I'm sort of like thinking, okay, I'm just going to hang this on my wall, and it's beautiful. But I really deep down, I had this desire to learn how to play this instrument. And I can remember one night late. I was working late, and I was looking at this beautiful piece of art, and I was thinking, I have got to figure out how to play this instrument. And I just typed in alphorn lessons and which I'd done before, and somehow I think I did this. Alphorn lessons, Salt Lake City, Utah, and this website comes up, which I had not seen previously. And I'm looking at this, and it said, every year we hold the North American Alphorn Conference. There's an Alphorn conference. If you don't think there's a conference for everything, there's an Alphorn conference. Every year we hold the North American Alphorn Conference in Snowbird, Utah. And this guy's got a Utah number, and come to find out, he's like 30 miles away from me. And so I call it, his name's Tony Brazelton, who is also one of my heroes. And I call him and he's like, yeah, I do this conference every year. And I said to him, I really want to learn this instrument. And he said, yeah, I don't teach, but why don't you plan to come? This is like, I think this is February or March. He said, why don't you come to our conference in Snowbird? So I said, great, I'll be there. When is it? He said, August. I said, okay. So I sort of shelved it, but thinking, okay, I'll go to the conference. This is weird. It's a conference, but I'll go. So I go to this conference in August, several months later. Now this is August of 2019, and all of those emotions that I had felt that night in Interlochen it came back. And Tony Brazelton and Bill Hobson, the two North American, really the fathers of the Alphorn in America, are there at this conference, and they are playing some of the most beautiful music every night. You know Snowbird. You've been to Snowbird. Every night, Bill Hobson would go out with this incredible horn that he built himself, and he would play this amazing music. And I just felt all of those emotions back, and I just decided I'm going to learn how to play this instrument. And incredible that Tony Brazelton, just 30 miles away from me, I came to find out that he, for 25 years, had been recording this Alphorn music in the Wasatch, and you can look up his music if anybody has an interest in Alphorn music. He has recorded 12 albums over the last 25 years, all Alphorn music, and so has Bill Hobson, who you can pull up Bill Hobson and Tony Brazelton. Tony's music's all under his group, the Salzburger Echo, and listen to some of this music, and it is just mesmerizing. It really is. So, and I can remember I just thought I'm going to be determined to learn this instrument, being with these amazing artists who just took me into their family. They're like, you're kidding me. You can't read a note. You can't read anything. You don't read any music. I said, no, none. And this is the North American Conference for Alphorns. Most of these individuals that have attended this conference they're professional musicians that not only they play multiple instruments in symphony orchestras, and many of them have these degrees, PhDs in music, and they bring me into this family with zero foundation. And I'll be forever grateful to Tony and Bill and the others that said, you can do this, you just need the discipline. During that conference, Bill told me this story of the Alphorn, and like filled in some of the blanks that I didn't know and didn't understand. So I hear this story, I hear this history from Bill Hobson, and decide I'm going to commit to this. And so we go into end of 2019. I call Tony every day, Tony Brazelton. I'd call him and I'll say, Tony, you got to teach me how to play. And he'd say, no, I don't do it. I don't teach. I'm a performer. I'm sort of desperate. Well, what happens in 2020, which is incredible, and probably I would never have learned this instrument without COVID. A few months into COVID, Tony calls me and he said, are you still interested in learning how to play the Alphorn? I said, yes, I'll do whatever I need to do. I'll do this. He said, do you have a place to play? I said, you bet I do. I've got our LSI world headquarters, 40,000 square feet. Nobody's in it. They're all working from home because of COVID. Come up. So he did. So he would come up and he would say, you know, play this, da, 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 and I'd try to play. And I could tell he was so kind, but so frustrated. I didn't read music. I had no musical background at all. And so he got me to a point where I could play a few songs. And what I was doing was I was on all my ski adventures. On when I was hiking and skiing and skinning, I would take my alphorn into the mountains and play. And I got to the point where I could play a few things, but more than anything, I just loved being in the mountains, playing this alphorn like the shepherds, and translating my love of the mountains and love of skiing through this art form that is the alphorn. So for several months, I started working with Tony, and he would come to Ellis. Nobody knew this. No, there's not a lot of people that have heard this story, but every couple of days, every couple times a week, he would come late, 6, 7 o'clock at night to LSI World Headquarters, which was empty, and we would play in our classified conference room for a couple of hours, and he would try to, help me through this. And it was good for him too, because he was used to playing every day. He was this professional musician, and COVID had just shut this down, and he wasn't playing. And so I think just having the opportunity to play was great for him as well. And a lot of this was just selfishly, I just say, hey, Tony, here's a piece. I want you to play this. And he would play it, and I just melt. I would love hearing this. So after several months, really probably this time of 2020, 2 years ago, about December of 2020, I'd been working with him for several months, and I felt like I had not progressed much. I still I could read a little bit of music. He had tried to teach me some music theory. We were playing a song, he finally grabbed me and he said, "You are terrible."
Oh no.
You are terrible, and you need a theory foundation. You have got to get some music theory if we're going to continue to play, because you can't read music. You don't have any music theory. When it was like he was trying to teach me another language that I didn't speak. So he said, Weber State's got a great theory program. Just enroll in Weber State University, get a degree, or take some classes in music theory. You don't need even a degree. So about that time, I was about to start, and he introduced me to somebody that he had known who lived in Chicago, who he had worked with previously, and her name was Natalie Douglas, I think at the time, and then she had gotten married not long after I had met her. I believe that was the case, that she was still Natalie Douglas. And she had sort of become this mythical individual. She had a PhD in horn performance, and also she had pursued this postdoctorate and PhD in solfege. And so I'd heard her name in different communities. Robert Brazelton and Tony had talked about Natalie. So he introduces me to Natalie through Zoom, and I talked to her about my story, and she came back a few weeks later and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about this. Do not enroll in Weber State. You will hate it." Well, I had gone through this process. I had enrolled. I had tried to get into these classes. I tried to connect with the dean of music, and it was just infuriating. I mean, I could not get anybody to call me back. I mean, it was during COVID, but still, it was just horrible. The worst experience ever. And I've got a lot of friends at Weber State, and I love Weber State, but I'm telling you, from an adult student trying to enroll in a class at Weber State, it was miserable. It was horrible.
Oh no.
So Natalie said to me, Dr. Gronick said, "Do not go, do not do that. You will hate it. It'll be a waste of your time and money. she said, I've never done this before, but what if we work together and I gave you the music theory that you need to learn this instrument? I was just like, I mean, this could not, it was amazing how we had met. It was amazing that this came together at that time. And I said to her, Natalie, I would love that. So she started putting together this curriculum for me. And she told me about, do you know what solfege is? Have you heard of solfege?
Yes, I was looking it up before this episode and I did a little bit of research, but explain it for me and our audience.
It's most people in the West, even Western Europe or in America, North and South America, in the West, most people have never heard of solfege. It's a very old concept that most people, when I talk about solfege, they'll have a connection. And this is the connection most people have with solfege. In The Sound of Music, when Maria is teaching the kids music, she teaches the kids the song Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. And so almost everybody, when I say, you remember that part of the movie
Do
or the play? Yes, right, exactly.
Right.
That is based on real music theory that has been for 1,500 years in Central and Eastern Europe. They have been using this concept of solfege, which is the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do concept, to learn how to play instruments. And they teach music theory through solfege. You learn intervals. You learn how to play and sing in different keys. And so she gives me this basis of this is how we're going to learn music theory, and it's through this concept of solfege. And she would say, and I had never, like I said, no history. She would say, I want you to sing 3 notes. And I couldn't do it. And I was so embarrassed and so I mean, every time she would work with me, I could just tell that she was so frustrated and I was frustrated and I never had gone down this path of learning where I couldn't do it. I could not do it. This went on for weeks. So this was most of last year, early last year. And she would schedule these Zoom calls and she would give me this homework and I would work on it and I could not do it. And I was just so frustrated. So I had never experienced something like this where I felt like I did not have the ability to do this. And she was so incredible through this. And I mean, here is one of the most celebrated musicians. She is an incredible French horn performer, has a PhD in French horn performance. And one of the things I didn't talk about with the alphorn is what happened with the alphorn over time is, it's hard to get a 13-foot wood instrument into a concert hall, right? So somebody said, what if we just rolled that instrument up into a horn? And so what eventually became the natural horn in the key of F, then once the valves and the technology, the manufacturing, and engineering behind the French horn came about with valves, it really is just the alphorn that became the natural horn initially, and then the French horn evolved into the French horn at some point where you could play in every key and every note. So for her to say and agree to work with me was just this unbelievable experience. And there have been very few people that have in my life that have had this kind of commitment and dedication to ensuring that I learn a concept like Natalie. And I mean, she has been, what an incredible teacher she is. I mean, I'll just give you the history. For the first 6 months, I couldn't do it. And I would go to every one of these meetings with her, these Zoom meetings. We would try to work through it. And she would, I look back on some of that, but she is such a teacher at heart, where she kept saying, she kept changing the way her approach with me, where she would finally, we'd make progress, and she'd figure out, this is how he learns, and this is how I need to approach my teaching. So, I mean, a lot of it was her, not just my commitment and my discipline to learn this instrument and learn some music theory. It was her pedagogy approach in how she could connect the dots on how I would learn. And what she did is, over the course of really a few months, I mean, the first 6 months, I even went back to her and I said, Natalie, you're wasting your time and my time, and I don't know why you're still here. And she said, I see that you've got this potential and that you can do this. And this is how we're going to approach it. And every time we would meet, she figured it out. She said, I'm going to take this impossible project. And I think she was determined that she was going to make this happen. She had never had a student that had zero musical foundation. Never. Most of her students are graduate and PhD students that have had 30 years, 20 years of history in their musical foundation. And so she starts from nothing and teaches me to read music and teaches me theory and teaches me how to transpose music in every key, and has taken me to this music foundation now of theory, and has given me the ability to play some of the most famous, iconic pieces of the alphorn along the way. It's just been incredible. She's my Jedi master for music, and I'll just forever be grateful for what she's done for me in this short period of time. And it really was a 6-month period of time. It has not been years. So last year, really between July and December of last year, she taught me, basically 4 years of music theory that I would have received at a university. And then has taken me into these advanced concepts of transposing in every key, being able to look at music and sing and transpose in my head every key, and then play this very difficult instrument, which I think it's one of the most beautiful and most difficult instruments. I mean, it is hard to master. So here's the punchline to all of this, is that last year she said to me, about this time last year, she said, what do you want to do in 2022? What are your objectives? And I said, my love of this instrument and is really, I just want to go in the mountains and play when I ski and when I climb. And she said, that's great. That's great if that's the only thing that you want to do. But if you want to progress, I want you to perform. And so she said, she gave me this challenge that she said, I want you to go to Switzerland and perform at the Super Bowl of the Alphorn competition for the last 200 years. Every year for 200 years, since 1803, they've had this competition where the best alphorn musicians, artists in the world come and perform and compete. And what's incredible is you had to learn a piece. It had to be a new piece. You had to learn it and have it memorized, and then go perform for these judges who are the world's best subject matter experts in the alphorn. So last year I had Jake Martin, who is one of our producers for the podcast and also an incredible musician, write me this piece that I took to Nandas, Switzerland, and performed and competed with some of the best alphorn artists in the world. And what an incredible experience as I look back on the last really 18 months of this path, where being humble enough to learn something new, and my thinking has changed too about learning new things, that there's real value in approaching learning, whatever the subject is. I mean, I've told this crazy story of this path that I've taken in learning an instrument, and also learning the foundation for music, which was incredibly difficult for me. I think there's real value in that, in however you approach a new subject. And I mean, I just can't express my gratitude enough for Natalie and what she has done and how she approached her teaching and her commitment, her discipline as an amazing teacher, that she was going to teach me, she was going to figure out how I learn and then model her teaching approach to how I learn, not the other way around. Not, this is how you're going to learn this concept of music theory and this instrument, but rather she approached teaching from, this is how he learns. And it's not the way she's used to teaching these amazing students that she has as one of the top horn professors in the world renowned. She is a subject matter expert on horn performance and solfege, and that she was able to figure out how I learned, and has given me this amazing talent and skill that is just incredible. So anyway, long story that going full circle from where we started. Any comment that you have on any of that, Lauren?
Yes, I feel like this really speaks. I mean, I love the story. I think it's I feel like the pandemic really forced a lot of people to learn a lot of things that they weren't maybe not necessarily willing to learn before, but it gave us, the space and time to do that. But I also feel like this speaks a testament to you as a businessman and the folklore I've heard at LSI of well, I'm going to learn how to do this or I'm going to die trying. Like, I feel like a lot of the stories I've heard during my time at LSI has been, I'm going to keep working this. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep trying until I succeed. And I think that's just what learning is in general, is you can't stop learning just because it gets hard or you're frustrated or you find it inconveniencing. And I really like the story because I think it really demonstrates your willingness to deal with a really hard situation, one that you didn't think you were going to necessarily not survive, but one that you maybe didn't know you were going to learn. And I think that happens a lot with any sort of learning, that it's going to be really hard and you're going to want to give up and you're going to be like, okay, well, I'm at my breaking point. This is as far as I can go. And then still putting in one more step and seeing if that's the right one.
And I think having the humility, checking your ego, which was so hard for me, as Natalie can attest, that it was so embarrassing that I couldn't do this. And
Yes, it is so embarrassing when you can't do something perfectly on the first try. It's humiliating.
having that, approaching this learning as like a child, and that, yeah, it's going to be hard, and checking your ego and being able to accept criticism and adjust, and the discipline behind it has taught me so much that I didn't anticipate when I went down this path. And so if anybody ever asks me, who has had significant influence on your life, I mean, Natalie is at the top of my list. And and I've only met her one time, a couple times. I mean, most of this has been done by Zoom. It's incredible that what she's accomplished virtually and has given me has just been remarkable.
That's awesome.
But Natalie, thank you. If you listen to this, Natalie, Tony Brazelton, Bill Hobson, you three are the trifecta of my Alphorn Jedi Masters. Thank you. Thank you. This has been a great path. And I think that there's a lot that we could unpackage here. And so we've got two more in this series that we're going to do. I'm excited for the next two. They just keep getting better.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm liking where it's going.
I do too. Anything else, Lauren, as we wrap this up? Anything you want to convey to the team or our listeners?
I guess I'm just looking forward to my next big learning opportunity, and I am really excited to learn more and just be that little information sponge. And I think we're in a great place. And and we'll make sure to link all of the things below, and I'll link to some of Tony's albums and his songs, and hopefully we can connect to everyone.
Absolutely. One of the things that I felt to mention during this path, Natalie, Dr. Grana has written this incredible book. And if you have any interest in music at all, buy her book. It is amazing. And so during this path with Natalie, she would send me pages from her book, and I was her her test subject on a lot of this over the last couple of years. Her book is you can buy it on Amazon or anywhere. But A Singing Approach to Horn Playing. But it's not just about the French horn. It really is a great place to start music theory through solfege. She's amazing. Buy her book.